what bills are considered dead. Because like, and how long it took for them to just, get rid of that bill so why is it important to make sure the process occurs this way in regards to the bill being a law? Okay, so this is the process in which I talked about it a couple times. The bill goes from the House to the Senate, and then it goes to the President or the Governor, right? So what is that called? What's that term called?
Ratification.
Mm-hmm. It's an elementary process that we learned when we were kids in like fifth grade. Checks and balances. Remember that? That's what it's called, checks and balances, because you don't just want them to just pass everything, because if it's a House heavy in Republicans, which we have now, or a House heavy in Senators, which we have now, then they can just pass their own stuff and be like, I don't care. So it's really meant to make sure that everything's done fairly and it benefits all people.
But the actual passing is ratification. So the passing between the two is
Okay.
the ratification.
Checks and balances. That's what the term I was looking for, was checks and balances. Okay. So regarding, what's the difference between resolution and a bill? There really is one. This is pretty much what this is saying. And I'm going to give you an example instead of reading all this to you. Sheriff Mike Williams just asked the council for emergency funds to provide tactical equipment to be used for criminal investigation. This would be considered a resolution, but it's still going to become a law when city council approves the $250,000 so that they can identify fingerprints a lot faster and arrest people. So here it's saying that the joint resolution is a form of legislative measure to be used to propose changes in law. Okay? So that was one example. Okay, so I just slide this here, but we pretty much went over the House bills and Senate bills. It's very similar to the federal level. Some people got backwards. This is regarding the state level. All right, so we are at the end of our lecture, but what we want to make sure that we understand, the purpose of this whole training was to understand what each committee is. Each committee is a political lobbying entity. Okay, this training will help committee members to understand the role of each entity of the three branches and where to focus lobbying efforts. This training is to provide resources, which gives access to methods in addressing legislators, where to access bills, legislative information, and overall government information on all levels. The training will help each committee follow a bill and advocate for a protest against policy. And then after Alicia's done, we'll talk about the different resource types, so you guys can.
So we pretty much discussed everything that's like formally outlined in the Constitution, powers and the rights that are given to our government. So we discussed the three different branches at each of the federal, state, and the local levels. What we're actually going to discuss now are practices. This is actually a practice that is executed by the federal government. Previously we discussed the districts. And districts are groups of, the local groups of people. These are actually your actual boundaries. So if we take a look at a map, your district is going to be represented by the geological location, geographical location. Sorry. The issue with that is that they're not uniform. They are actually determined by the legislature. This video will actually explain what that ends up meaning.
So Donald Trump was elected president, and now Republicans control the Senate, the House of Representatives, 33 out of 50 governorships, and 32 state legislatures. So while Republicans control our government basically at every level, the Democrats have a shot to fight back in 2 years, right? Wrong! That's because Republicans enjoy a series of structural advantages in our system. For example, Hillary Clinton earned almost 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. But she isn't president because of the Electoral College. The U.S. isn't shifting towards conservatism. Republicans are just far, far better at rigging the system to remain in power. One of the main ways they do this is gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering is the art of drawing political district lines to give your side an advantage. It is legal, and it goes back to the dawn of America.
That's David Daley. He wrote this book.
We are the only democracy in the world that allows politicians to choose their own voters.
Look at this strange shape. You won't find this in a geometry textbook, but you will find it in North Carolina's 4th District. Gerrymandering has been around forever. But in 2010, we saw
Gerrymandering on steroids. What the Republicans did in 2010 is use gerrymandering as a blunt force, a partisan weapon, in order to govern from the minority.
Here's what happened. Republicans devised something called Red Map, which had 2 parts. First, they targeted traditionally swing state legislatures and convinced national donors to pour money into those races.
Well, we raised $30 million.
That's Chris Jankowski. He came up with Red Map, and it worked.
We had an election where we set a record for any political party in history in the net gain of state legislative seats, over 700.
Part 2 is where things get really clever. Every 10 years, the United States has a census. And after each census, we redraw the voting district lines. The key here is that those who control state legislatures and governorships oversee the mapping and can manipulate it for political gain.
Red Map is the biggest political heist of the century, and they come out of 2010 with control of 2/3 of all of the legislative chambers in America.
And so the map drawing began. And this wasn't your grandpappy's gerrymandering.
The biggest change has been technology. This data is being reduced to something that can be manipulated on an iPad.
Using a program called Maptitude, Republican strategists adjusted district lines street by street based on voting records and demographics and even magazine subscriptions. And it worked. Brilliant. In 2012, the Democrats racked up 1.4 million more votes nationally for the House of Representatives. Yet the Republicans held a strong majority of seats. Since then, Republicans have ruled Congress from a minority. And as politicians come from more and more secure local bases, they don't need to compromise. In fact, as we've seen with the rise of the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus, compromise is seen as a weakness. Republicans literally shut down the government.
We have made these districts more extreme. We've made our politics more extreme. We've made it impossible for anything to get done. And when nobody can get anything done, it leads to anger, and that anger gets easily appropriated by a strongman. That's Donald Trump.
So there you go. Republicans have used things like gerrymandering and voter ID laws to take over nearly every aspect of American politics. Now they get to rule even though they get fewer votes. Meanwhile, the Democrats can only kick themselves for not effectively exploiting the system to remain in power when they had the chance. I mean, they could have done things like automatic voter registration. At this point, the Republicans have gerrymandered so well that no matter what happens in the next 2 years, they're likely to maintain their majority in the House of Representatives in 2018. Don't worry, the Democrats still have the redistricting in 2031 to look forward to.
Wow.
I wanted to just, before we close out the rest of the training, I wanted to review the sites that we have. Just going down
Pick up.
this way. All right, so the website that we have, the one website is Congress.gov. That's pretty self-explanatory. GovTrack talks about the bills within the House of Representatives, the U.S. Congress, so you can trace like what's been happening with the bills that are coming up, bills that are already in the House that are being gathered. COJ.net, this is the government site, and it has all the links for like city council, for the mayor's page, the sheriff's page. This one, I can't remember what it is. I should have. Oh no, I'm sorry. This one is the actual state website, which has a link for the Senate and a link for the House of Representatives for the Florida. This pick number 5 is a really good resource that we can all use for our lobbying piece from each committee. So, for example, it tells you how to communicate with legislators, what's an appropriate way to go. It's a nice long list of different things and steps you can take. So it's a big cheat sheet, and it makes sure like a checklist for you to be able to type it up. Ballotpedia.org, which is a great site. It gives you information of all the different legislators across the United States. It gives you when election time is coming up. It'll give you who's on the ballots. It's actually 501. No, it actually has information about 501c4, which is what we are. With the lobbying, right? I also added the actual Constitution, so you can see where the Constitution, it does direct the activities of our legislators and our government. And then also Vote Smart is just a really neat link that I found that explains how a bill is made, maybe a little bit more in depth, and it also has some really good terms and with the definitions, which is pretty cool. So that's our resources for the work. And I think that's everything. So any questions? Any questions? Bridget, I always call you Bridget, because you're a B. You're a BB. Any questions? How'd you do on your post test? Did you take it? How'd you do? I'm Bridget.